normal has become living a nightmare.
Four historic crises.
These people are being crushed.
It will send Donald Trump packing.
America should not take lectures on racial justice from Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe.
President Trump inherited an economy from Obama-Biden administration that was given to him.
My husband has seen his share of bullies and of trials and of tragedies.
I'm angry with myself, and I am no less frustrated with the environment of presidential politics.
We will tell them what we did.
But while I'll be a Democratic candidate, I will be an American president. I'll work hard for those who didn't support me, as hard for them as I did for those who did vote for me. Because we do not scare easily. We never bow. We never bend. We never break when confronted with crisis. No, we endure. We overcome. And we always, always, always move forward. I accept this nomination for President of the United States of America.
Joe Biden, born during the Second World War in 1942, spent his childhood in the blue-collar city of Scranton, Pennsylvania, where his father struggled to find a steady job after a series of business setbacks. When Joey was 10, his family moved to Wilmington, Delaware, after his father secured a job selling cars there. As a child, Biden had a debilitating stutter. Classmates mockingly called him Dash, liking his staccato pronunciation to Morse code, and Bye-Bye on account of his attempts to say his last name, Biden. Biden attended the nearby University of Delaware, where he studied history and political science and played football. In his junior year at college, Biden went to the Bahamas for spring break, where he snuck into a hotel pool and met his future wife, Nelia Hunter. Even at such a young age, Joe had high aspirations and wanted to impress. On being asked what he intended to do for a living, student Joe told Nelia's mother that he intended to become the President of the United States. The couple fell for each other right away, and encouraged by his new love, he applied himself more fully to his studies, and in 1965, on his graduation from Delaware, he was accepted into Syracuse University Law School. Sweethearts Joe and Nelia married the next year in 1966. On his graduation from law school in 1968, Joe moved to Wilmington, Delaware to begin his career practicing at a law firm. It was around this time he became an active member of the Democratic Party, and in 1970, Biden was elected to the New Castle County Council at 29 years old to the U.S. Senate in 1972, becoming the 5th youngest senator in U.S. history. Just a few weeks after Biden won his Senate seat, a tractor-trailer carrying corn cobs struck the family's station wagon as his wife and 3 children were driving home from buying a Christmas tree. Nelia and their 13-month-old daughter, Naomi, died before they reached the hospital. His 2 young sons, Bo and Hunter, were taken to the hospital with their injuries. In fact, Biden was sworn into the Senate in his son Bo's hospital room, skipping the swearing-in ceremony for new cantors in Washington. In order to spend as much time as possible with his sons, Biden decided to continue to live in Wilmington, commuting to and from Washington each day by Amtrak train, a practice he maintained through his entire tenure in the Senate. From 1973 to 2009, Joe Biden served a distinguished Senate career. Over the years, Joe won respect as one of the Senate's leading foreign policy experts, serving as chairman of the Committee of Foreign Relations for several years. His many foreign policy positions included promoting stability and peace in the Balkans, advocating for strategic arms limitation with the Soviet Union, expanding NATO to include former Soviet bloc nations, and opposing the First Gulf War and the Bosnian War.
I think we should be using U.S. air power to take out the heavy artillery around Sarajevo and in other parts of Bosnia.
Biden famously went up against Secretary of State George Shultz in 1986 when he defended President Reagan's South African policy. The administration was criticized for lacking moral backbone in dealing with the white minority government in Pretoria. Joe Biden passionately spoke out in support of the majority black population of South Africa and against the oppressive apartheid regime. After Shultz endorsed Reagan's opposition to economic sanctions in South Africa, Biden said, "I hate to hear an administration and a Secretary of State refusing to act on a morally abhorrent point."
This is not a situation in which we can afford to be locked in the straitjacket of rigid legislation.
These people are being crushed. And we're sitting here with the same kind of rhetoric. The same thing we heard. We heard go slow. We heard we have to take care of the problem afterwards. We heard we can't impose.
You are totally misconstruing the testimony that I gave.
I'm not calling for violence.
That's what you're doing.
I hate to hear.
Exactly what you're doing.
I hate to hear an administration and a Secretary of State refusing to act on a morally abhorrent point. I hate to hear this country. I'm ashamed that this country puts out a policy like this that says nothing. Nothing. It says continue the same.
Biden ran for the 1988 Democratic presidential nomination, formally declaring his candidacy at Wilmington train station on June 9, 1987. He was attempting to become the youngest president since John F. Kennedy. He had been on presidential watch lists for years, and when he was originally elected to the Senate in 1972, he was already seen as White House material. By the time he declared his candidacy for the presidency in 1987, he had been working as a senator for more than a decade, so he had a great deal of experience in politics. He was certainly considered as a bright new hope, great at giving speeches, and markedly different to many of the other Democratic runners. However, at the start of the primaries, a video surfaced that spliced together footage of UK Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock giving a speech, and Biden, who was clearly quoting Kinnock's words at the Iowa State Fair, without attributing parts of his speech to being those of Kinnock.
And I started thinking as I was coming over here, why is it that Joe Biden is the first in his family ever to go to a university?
Why am I the first Kinnock in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
Why is Glenys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
After this, more and more examples of Biden's lack of attribution came to the public's attention. The scandal came more to the forefront in people's minds than his excellent record as a senator. Once the press made textual fidelity an issue, earlier cases surfaced. Biden had failed to give proper citation to both Robert and Humphrey Kennedy. Added to this, during his first few months at Syracuse Law School in 1965, Joe failed a course as he wrote a paper that plagiarized 5 pages from a published law review article without footnotes or quotation marks. At the time, Biden was able to make up the course, but he could not forget this front-page news during his quest for the Democratic nomination. So in September 1987, he cut his losses and announced that he was dropping out of the race.
I'm angry with myself for having been put myself in the position of having to make this choice. And I am no less frustrated with the environment of presidential politics.
Relinquishing this dream was difficult, but potentially it saved his life. A severe headache in February 1988 turned out to be a brain aneurysm. After a grueling 2 rounds of brain surgery, he told Time magazine, "There is no doubt, the doctors have no doubt, that had I remained in the race, I'd be dead.
My goal was, when I started running in 1972, was I wanted my daughters, if I had one, I just had one, I was 14 months old, that she would be entitled to every single solitary opportunity my kids were, and there's not a damn thing that a man can do that a woman can't do. I mean, really mean that. There is not a single thing you can't do.
In 1994, one of Biden's biggest achievements was that he co-sponsored the Violence Against Women Act, which provided $1.6 billion to investigate and prosecute violent crimes against women, plus imposed automatic and mandatory restitution on those convicted, and allowed victims to sue their attackers in civil court, even if prosecutors did not proceed in criminal charges. Other notable causes Biden supported included campaigning for American action to end the genocide in Darfur, and speaking out against President George W. Bush's handling of the Iraq War, particularly opposing the troop surge in 2007.
In destabilizing Iran, we should be a little. We spent some real time thinking about that.
20 years after his first presidential bid, Biden decided to run for the U.S. presidency in 2008. During the campaign, Biden focused on his plan to achieve political success in the Iraq War through a system of federalization. He referenced his record in the Senate as the head of several congressional committees and experience in foreign policy. As Biden entered the presidential race, he attacked frontrunner Hillary Clinton's plan for the war in Iraq. Biden called Clinton's plan a disaster and counterproductive. Biden stated that his plan called for a political solution, unlike Clinton's military solution. However, 2008 was not the right time for Biden. After years of the Bush administration, people in America wanted change, and Barack Obama offered this in the form of being not only the first African American to run for office, but by being bright, articulate, and a symbol of change after years of war in the Middle East.
We are one people, we are one nation, and together we will begin the next great chapter in the American story with 3 words that will ring from coast to coast, from sea to shining sea. Yes, we can. Thank you, New Hampshire. Thank you.
One of the biggest problems Biden faced at the time was voters didn't know about him or his candidacy. A poll conducted by Gallup found that 38% of the public had never heard of Joe Biden, and 17% had no opinion at all about him. 0% of the public had never heard of Hillary Clinton, and only 3% had no opinion. Although the public opinion of Hillary may not have been completely positive, at least the public knew who she was.
Some people think you bring change by demanding it, and others think you bring change by hoping for it. I think you bring change by working really, really hard for it every single day. It takes perseverance and persistence, and yes, some perspiration.
Biden has often been criticized for what he says. To quote Jonathan Darman of MSNBC, "The senator's biggest enemy has always been his own mouth. And it is true that comments about the other candidates in the 2008 bid overshadowed his policies." He specially drew criticism in the popular press for his evaluation of Senator Obama. Biden was quoted in the New York Observer as saying, "I mean, you got the first mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook, man." Biden sought to clear up the controversy by apologizing to Obama on the same day, and repeated his regret on The Daily Show that same evening. "Look, the other part of this thing that got me in trouble is using the word clean. I should have said fresh." Some media observers labeled Biden's announcement as a launchpad disaster. The remark did undermine his campaign, and with Obama being the popular candidate, this comment severely damaged Biden's fundraising ability. After finishing in 5th place in the Iowa caucus on January 3, 2008, Biden ended his presidential bid. In a tearful rally with family and friends by his side, Biden declared, "I ain't going away. I'll be back to the Senate as the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and I will continue to make the case I've been making." Biden was right about that. He had created a favorable impression during the debates and increased his stature among Washington politicos. In particular, Barack Obama changed his opinion of Biden, liking how he had handled himself at campaign stops and appreciating his appeal to working-class voters. On August 23, 2008, the Obama campaign announced that Biden would become Barack Obama's running mate. During the campaign, he used his political experience to compliment Obama. He could relate to blue-collar Americans, being originally from Pennsylvania, a blue-collar state. He had a multitude of connections in Capitol Hill, and he had more personal connections in foreign policy than Obama. The pair were a perfect fit.
I love how Republican nominees are always going to change the Republican Party. He's going to change how Washington works. Well, folks, we've seen that movie before. And you know from experience, the sequel is always worse than the original.
Barack Obama and Joe Biden convincingly defeated the Republican ticket of Arizona Senator John McCain and Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. And on January 20th, 2009, when Obama was sworn in as the 44th U.S. president, Biden became the 47th vice president.
Alliances to repair. The road ahead will be long. Our climb will be steep. We may not get there in 1 year or even in 1 term. But America, I have never been more hopeful than I am tonight that we will get there. I promise you, we as a people will get there.
While Biden mostly served in the role of behind-the-scenes advisor to the president, he took particularly active roles in formulating federal policies relating to Iraq and Afghanistan. Although he lost an internal debate to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton regarding his opposition to sending 21,000 new troops to the war in Afghanistan, his skepticism was still considered valuable in the administration. And in 2009, Biden's views gained more influence as Obama reconsidered his Afghanistan strategy. As vice president, he also played a leading role in getting the economy back on track. Biden chaired the Middle Class Task Force, which was a guiding force in the administration's efforts to improve the livelihoods of middle-class families. He also oversaw the administration's implementation of the Recovery Act, which added 2 million jobs, helped stave off another Great Depression, and made an unprecedented investment in America's infrastructure. One of the main issues for Biden was to create a level playing field for American workers. He fought for payroll tax cuts during the economic recovery, ensuring a tax cut for every single worker in America. He pushed for a higher national minimum wage and supported state and city level efforts when Congress failed to agree to a higher national wage floor. What Biden was most well known for during his time as vice president was his stance in combating violence against women. As the author of the original Violence Against Women Act, Vice President Biden continued to draw upon his years in the United States Senate to address violence against women, specifically domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. Tragically, in 2015, Joe lost his son Beau to brain cancer at the age of 46. The nature and seriousness of the illness had not been previously disclosed to the public, and Biden had quietly reduced his public schedule to spend more time with Beau. Before his death, Bo had been widely seen as the frontrunner for the 2016 Democratic nomination for governor of Delaware.
Bo would always say, "Dad, look at me, look at me. When they ask about me, smile, Dad. Don't look sad, Dad. No matter what happens, Dad, I'm going to be okay, but you got to promise me, promise me you'll be okay." What he meant by that was he knew we'd take care of the family, but he wanted to make sure that I continued to do the things that I cared so deeply about.
Following this tragedy, Biden considered a run for the presidency, but he put the speculation to rest in October 2015, when he announced that he would not seek the 2016 Democratic nomination. In the White House Rose Garden with his wife Jill and President Obama by his side, Biden made his announcement, referring to his son's recent death in his decision-making. Biden added, "While I will not be a candidate, I will not be silent. I intend to speak out clearly and forcefully to influence as much as I can."
To Joe Biden. You were the first decision I made as a nominee, and it was the best. Not just because you have been a great vice president, but because of the bargain I gave your brother. And we love you and Jill like family, and your friendship has been one of the great joys of our lives.
On January 12, 2017, President Obama presented Biden with the Presidential Medal of Freedom with distinction, the nation's highest civilian honor, in a surprise ceremony at the White House. Obama called Biden the best vice president America's ever had. As promised, Biden did not remain quiet during the campaign seasons, publicly flagging up his disagreement with many of the policies of the Republican presidential nominee, Donald Trump. On June 20th, Biden critiqued Trump's proposal to temporarily ban Muslims from entering the United States, as well as his stated intent to build a wall along the border with Mexico, adding that Trump's suggestion to either torture and/or kill family members of terrorists was damaging both to American values and to our security. Biden asserted that moral and centrist voters would not vote for Trump.
I stand here to tell you that I have no doubt, none whatsoever, that in the Trump administration there will be no diminution of support as a consequence of this transition. Even if the new administration were inclined to reduce the commitment, which it is not, Congress would never let it happen. The American people would never let it happen.
Biden did occasionally reveal his mixed feelings on bypassing the chance to run for president. In March 2017, he said he could have won, and in November, he elaborated on those thoughts in an interview with Oprah Winfrey. No woman or man should announce they are running for president unless they can answer two questions. One, do they truly believe they're the most qualified person for that moment? I believe I was. But was I prepared to be able to give my whole heart, my whole soul, and all my intention to the endeavor? And I knew I wasn't. Joe Biden continued to speak out against Trump once he was in office, especially questioning comments Trump had made about climate change, healthcare, immigration, and LGBTQ rights. On April 25, 2019, Biden delivered the expected news that he was running for president in 2020. In his presidential announcement video, Biden openly criticizes Trump's leadership.
It was there on August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it.
Joe's slogan for the 2020 race was, "Our best days still lie ahead." And he wants America to build back better in economic policy that was aimed at two groups of traditional supporters, namely blue-collar workers and liberal-thinking previous Democrat voters.
We can overcome 4 years of Donald Trump, but if we give him 8 in the White House, we'll forever and fundamentally change the character of this nation, in my view. And that's why we have to win this time. That's why we have to take back the White House.
Having worked so closely with the previous president, Biden was able to credibly claim the legacy of Obama, and as well as relying on being popular with voters who look back fondly at the Obama years. He had also gained a foothold with the older and more moderate members of the Democratic base. One of the most immediate and obvious challenges that faced the presidential candidates and the country as a whole was how to tackle the coronavirus outbreak. Joe Biden's approach in tackling the virus was to provide free testing for all and hire 100,000 people to set up a national contact tracing program. Biden wanted to give firmer national guidance through federal experts, set up at least 10 testing centers in every state, and call up federal agencies to deploy resources.
We would love to have Joe Biden as our president. He's the people's president. He's going to make reason out of this madness we're in right now, and I think he'd be great for the people.
So I think people are looking more for unity and community and working together in diversity. And I think Joe Biden is about diversity.
I mean, I would be proud of anybody who can, step up to the job at this point. Like, I mean, if it's somebody who happened to be from where I'm from, like, congratulations for me. But I mean, at this point, I just want, I would like results. I mean, I think that's what everybody would like is results. So,
Biden also wants to raise minimum wage and invest in green energy. In regards to the immediate impact of the coronavirus crisis, he has vowed to spend whatever it takes to increase direct money payment to families and extend loans to small businesses. He wants a $2 trillion investment in green energy and $400 billion pledge to use federal dollars to buy American goods, and a $300 billion investment in U.S.-made materials, services, research, and technology. Biden also called climate change an existential threat and says he will rally the rest of the world to act more quickly on curbing emissions by rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, the agreement Donald Trump withdrew from, which committed the U.S. to cutting greenhouse gases up to 28% by 2025, based on 2005 levels. In wake of the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, Biden believes that racism exists in the U.S. and must be dealt with through a wide range of social and economic programs that will support minorities.
Now's the time for healing. Now's the time for peace and calm on the streets of Ferguson.
It isn't lost on a lot of young folk of color in particular that it was during the Obama administration that Black Lives Matter really was birthed and came into its own.
Part of his Build Back program focuses on creating business support for minorities through a $30 billion investment fund. During his time as a senator in the 1990s, Biden's tough-on-crime position has been highly scrutinized, especially in the current political climate. However, he has progressed his stance from over 3 decades ago and has proposed policies to address gender, race, and income-based disparities in the justice system, reduce incarceration, and rehabilitate released prisoners.
This is no time for incendiary tweets. It's no time to encourage violence. This is a national crisis. We need real leadership right now.
Biden wants to expand Obamacare, which was the public health insurance scheme introduced when he was President Barack Obama's deputy, and implement a plan to ensure an estimated 97% of Americans. All Americans will be given the chance to enroll in the public health insurance option. This will be similar to Medicare, which will provide medical benefits to the elderly and to lower the age of eligibility for Medicare itself from 65 to 60 years old.
President Trump inherited an economy from Obama-Biden administration that was given to him, just like he inherited everything else in his life.
He also proposed plans to end the gun violence epidemic, which would amount to the largest changes to America's gun laws in more than 2 decades.
Normal has become living a nightmare. On October 1, 2017, was a normal day in Las Vegas, until one man in possession of a small arsenal of assault weapons, many modified with bump stocks, increasing the speed with which he could fire the weapons, and 100 rounds of ammunition with each of those assault weapons, was able to, in just 10 minutes, take out 58 innocent lives and hundreds more were wounded. The largest mass shooting in American history. And normal, to me and to all the people behind me, is not acceptable.
I'm just so grateful that I just missed it, but there's also so much pain of thinking, like, why wasn't it me, and what did those people do to deserve it?
Moms like Stephanie, they do not accept a world where her bright, beautiful 4-year-old daughter, Dayla, gets cut down by a stray bullet in front of her twin brother, and nothing changes. And I want to say to all of you here today, it takes enormous courage to be here. It takes enormous courage, because every single time, I know, every single time you show up at something like this or you speak to this issue, you relive as if the moment happened this moment. But you're giving people courage around the country. I don't accept that we can't stand up and say no more. Oppose a change in any way that would cure this god-awful problem. I've beaten the National Rifle Association nationally twice, passed meaningful gun legislation at a federal level, and I'll do it again.
This proposal includes universal background checks, an assault weapons ban, a public push for the development of smart guns, guns where only the owner can pull the trigger, and incentives for states to adopt red flag laws, which allow courts to confiscate guns from people deemed a risk to themselves or others, and develop gun licensing systems.
I can remember when I was a kid, graduating from high school. I'm going to my senior prom, drove down to Newark, Delaware, which is not far from where I went to school, but about 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Pulling my old car in and borrowing a car from my dad, a new car for the prom. And I walked in and asked the secretary, I said, Mary, where's Dad? He's outside, honey. My dad was a very decent, honorable, gentle man. And walking out and seeing him pacing outside the showroom. I said, what's the matter, Dad? And he looked up, he said, Joey. He said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I've told the story 1,000 times because it resonates with so many people. Because so many people went through the same thing today. I said, what's the matter, Dad? This is before cell phones. I thought maybe something happened to one of my siblings or my mom or something. I said, what's the matter, Dad? He said, I went to the bank today, honey, to see if they'd lend me the money to get you to school, help you get to school. They won't. Joey, I'm so ashamed. And millions of parents have that feeling because the cost of education for opportunity people has gotten so out of reach for so many people.
One notable shift to the left for Biden is that he has endorsed a handful of big pieces education policy that have become popular within the party. Universal preschool access, expansion of tuition-free colleges, and student loan debt forgiveness. These would be paid for by the money gained back from withdrawing the Trump-era tax cuts.
The second piece of allowing you to have your dignity. Does anybody think that 12 years of education is enough in the 21st century to be in the middle class? I don't know anybody who does. So, the report I did for President Obama before we left office, talking about the jobs of the future, we pointed out then, right today, 65 out of every 100 jobs in the United States of America requires something more than a high school degree. My wife, who still teaches at the community college, says it best. Any country that out-educates us is going to outcompete us. That's why I propose to making technical and community colleges free.
The main challenge for Biden is to undo many of Trump-era policies, as well as restoring America's reputation with regards to foreign policy.
And they know that if we give this man another 4 years in the White House, he'll forever and fundamentally change the character of this nation. We can't let this happen. That's why, from the moment I entered this race, I did say we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. And we are.
In his first 100 days in office, Mr. Biden has promised to reverse Trump policies that end the bans on travel from several majority Muslim countries, rescind limits on the number of applications for asylum, and also abolish the policy that separates parents from their children at the U.S.-Mexican border. He has also promised to protect the Dreamers, people brought illegally to the U.S. as children who were permitted to stay under an Obama-era policy, as well as ensure they are eligible for federal student aid. Another undertaking is to repair relationships with U.S. allies, particularly with the NATO alliance, which Mr. Trump has repeatedly threatened to undermine with funding cuts. Trump publicly attacked Biden on numerous occasions, branding him as Sleepy Joe.
America should not take lectures on racial justice from Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe.
It was also suggested that throughout the race that Trump and his party would create false stories to divert attention away from him. A new issue surfaced in September 2019 with the revelation that President Trump had pressured the Ukrainian government into investigating Biden and his son Hunter. This stemmed from Hunter's former involvement with the Ukrainian energy company, Burisma Holdings, and Biden's effort to have the country's prosecutor general at the time fired. Rudy Giuliani, former mayor of New York City and Donald Trump's advisor and personal lawyer, talks about his involvement with the case.
That there is an alternative theory of how this crime was committed. And the crime was committed by Democrats. And as his lawyer, it's my obligation to establish those facts.
Are you willing to testify in front of Congress?
Well, there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, would I like to testify and tell my story? Sure. I've been telling it all the time. In fact, you know my story. There's nothing I can tell them that you can't read online. From the very beginning, I've been totally transparent about this. There are things that I can't testify to because I'm a lawyer.
What has the president said to you this week?
He asked me how I'm doing. We talked about golf. And anything we talked about relating to the case, I can't tell you. The president's in a very good mood. And he's a good friend. He's been a friend for 30 years.
Are you at all concerned about your future? Because you have been placed as a central role in this.
No, I'm not concerned about my future. What I did is perfectly lawful, perfectly legal. I find it completely extraordinary that you're spending all this time asking me about what I did. All this time should be spent on the pay-for-play scheme that Biden set up, in which he made millions and millions of dollars using his son and having his son sell his office. That should shock you. But because we are distorted, this left-wing distortion that goes on, you're asking me about the process that I followed to uncover one of the biggest scandals. I should be considered a whistleblower. I should be getting whistleblower protection.
I don't care about Biden's campaign, but I do care about corruption. His campaign, that's up to him. Politics, that's up to them. I don't care about politics. This is about corruption. And if you look and you read our Constitution and many other things, I have an obligation to look at corruption. I have an actual obligation and a duty.
In a September 24th speech, Biden called Trump's actions an abuse of power and said he would support impeachment if the president did not cooperate with Congress, a topic that took an additional urgency when House Speaker Nancy Pelosi ignited impeachment proceedings that same day. The central 2020 Democratic presidential candidates were Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Michael Bloomberg, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, and Tulsi Gabbard, with the main threat to Biden being Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Bernie has a huge following and appeals to the further left side of the Democratic Party.
What we need is a new politics that brings working class people into our political movement, which brings young people into our political movement, and which in November will create the highest voter turnout in American political history.
I'm here today because I really want to support a man that I really believe in, the man that I believe that's actually going to do some good for this country, a man that's going to reshape things and actually really give power back to the people. And I really believe in his message.
Yeah, he seems the most genuine out of the candidates. The other candidates don't really seem like they want to make any active changes, but it does seem like he's the more genuine candidate.
It's expensive to have health care in the United States. As of today, Bernie will take away the middleman and give us cheaper health care and cheaper, better health care.
He has always been dedicated to fighting for the people like down here on the ground, the working class people of this country. And there are candidates who try to claim they will and then backtrack on their promises. And he has always stuck true to what he's believed in and what he has said he would do.
However, when Bernie dropped out of the race in April 2020, he made a point of telling his supporters to get behind Biden, who became the presumptive Democratic nominee after he dropped out of the 2016 race. Many supporters felt angry towards the candidate at the time, Hillary Clinton, which in turn led them to not voting. Sanders wants a Democrat in the White House.
I live in Vermont, and I do support Bernie. I think that the timing is a little off for Bernie to be president. And so I was really happy with the Obama administration. And so as much as there's been some complaints with Joe Biden himself, I have faith that he spent 8 years with a man who did a really good job.
Oh, I think that he might attract Republicans as well as Democrats, and it's all about beating Trump.
I feel like the country is on the right track. It's amazing to feel like we may be able to move past Trump. I'm excited.
Biden's appealed to the U.S. voters, as he has had a lot of experience within the White House already. At the time of the 2020 elections, many Americans were nostalgic for the previous Obama administration. Biden, as vice president through these years, offered a lot of the voters comfort. His wife, Jill Biden, who he has been married to since 1977, taught English and reading in high schools for 13 years, and also taught adolescents with emotional disabilities at a psychiatric hospital. From 1993 to 2008, she was an English and writing instructor at Delaware Technical and Community College. Since 2009, she has been a professor of English at Northern Virginia Community College and is thought to be the first second lady to hold a paying job while her husband was vice president.
Like I tell my students all the time, it's not enough to want to do well. You have to turn in the essay. You have to do the reading. You have to deliver on the promises you make. Joe wrote and passed the Violence Against Women Act when no one thought it could be done. He stood up to the NRA twice and won. He secured those last votes for the Affordable Care Act. He has spent his entire career bringing people together, building bridges, delivering on promises that he can make.
During Joe Biden's 2008 campaign to be the Democratic nominee, she continued to teach during the week and would join him for campaigning on weekends. Her down-to-earth appeal was an attractive quality to a lot of U.S. voters.
My husband has seen his share of bullies and of trials and of tragedies, but it's never made him feel cynical, never made him want to use his power for personal gain. Instead, It's made him more committed to serving others. A leader who brings people together, not tears families apart like we've seen at our borders. A president that you can be proud of, who believes that our best days are ahead of us. That's my husband, Joe Biden.
Kamala Harris, the California Democrat, was born in Oakland, California, to two immigrant parents, an Indian-born mother and Jamaican-born father.
We are a diverse country, yes. And some people would suggest that in diversity, when there is a diverse population, one cannot achieve unity. I reject that notion because this is my belief. Yes, we are diverse, and we have so much more in common than what separates us.
After her parents' divorce, Ms. Harris was raised primarily by her Hindu single mother, Shyamala Gopalan Harris, a cancer researcher and civil rights activist. She grew up engaged with her Indian heritage, joining her mother on visits to India. But Ms. Harris has said that her mother adopted Oakland's Black culture, immersing her two daughters, Kamala and her younger sister, Maya, within it. She became the district attorney, the top prosecutor, for San Francisco in 2003, before being elected the first woman and the first Black person to serve as California's Attorney General, the top lawyer and law enforcement official in America's most populous state. Ms. Harris gained a reputation as one of the Democratic Party's rising stars, using this momentum to propel her election as California's junior U.S. Senator in 2017. When she launched her candidacy for president to a crowd of more than 20,000 people in Oakland, California, her 2020 bid was met with initial enthusiasm, but the senator failed to articulate a clear rationale for her campaign and gave muddled answers to questions in key policy areas like healthcare.
We are not treating people equally in our healthcare system writ large if they don't have money.
She was also unable to capitalize on the clear high point of her candidacy, debate performance that showed off her prosecutorial skills, often placing Mr. Biden in the line of attack. After the 1971 Supreme Court ruling in Swan versus Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education, lower courts began mandating busing to effectively desegregate schools. Black students started taking school buses to majority white schools and white students to majority Black schools, often in neighborhoods far from where they lived. It became one of the most controversial topics in U.S. politics at the time. Before the Supreme Court mandated school desegregation, schools for African American children often had smaller resources compared to those white children attended, which in turn created racial gaps in achievement and opportunities. Supporters of busing argued that the practice was necessary to effectively integrate schools and help correct the damaging legacy of school segregation. But opponents of busing, many of whom were also opponents of school desegregation, argued that children were being transported to unsafe neighborhoods and objected to the long commutes children experienced. Others, including Biden, said that busing forced schools to achieve racial quotas and did not achieve equal opportunity for students. Biden's fight against busing more than 4 decades ago, as well as his praise for segregationist senators, has subjected him to scrutiny against the backdrop of today's more progressive Democratic Party.
I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of 2 United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the 2nd class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. We have to be honest about what happened. I mean, we really have to be honest. And I said what I meant. It was hurtful. I have a great deal of respect for Joe Biden. And I think it's really important for us to remember our nation's history on these issues. And that it's not history from a really long time ago. Like, it directly impacted me.
Biden called Harris's comments a mischaracterization of my position across the board. He said that he opposed busing mandated by the Department of Education, but that he took no issue with local districts busing as they saw fit. The two made amends, and Harris understood Joe's take on the issue and realized that this was decades ago, where the political climate was very different.
And when you put the kind of fight and work that you have always put into investing in the future of America, we will elect Joe Biden as the next president of the United States.
On August 11th, 2020, Biden announced Kamala Harris as his vice presidential running mate.
First of all, is the answer yes?
The answer is absolutely yes, Joe, and I am ready to work. I am ready to do this with you, for you. I'm just deeply honored, and I'm very excited.
Choosing Kamala Harris as his running mate mirrors Obama's decision to pick Biden in 2008. She balances Joe out. In August, Biden officially became the 2020 Democratic presidential nominee. His acceptance speech won praise from the left and right.
I accept this nomination for President of the United States of America. But while I'll be a Democratic candidate, I will be an American president.
In this election, we have a chance to change the course of history.
Here and now, I give you my word. If you entrust me with the presidency, I will draw on the best of us, not the worst.
So let's fight with conviction. Let's fight with hope. Let's fight with confidence in ourselves and a commitment to each other.
And now history has delivered us to one of the most difficult moments America's ever faced. Four historic crises, all at the same time.
We will tell them what we did.
And this is a battle we will win, and we'll do it together. I promise you.
From the moment Biden was selected as the Democratic presidential nominee, Trump attempted to cast doubt over Biden's abilities, claiming that he was suffering from dementia and that he was taking performance-enhancing drugs in the primaries. The first debate took place at Cleveland Clinic on September 29th. The 90-minute showdown was called a dumpster fire, a train wreck, and was widely criticized as being a low point in U.S. presidential politics. Amid the acrimonious exchanges, Trump repeatedly interrupted Biden and moderator Chris Wallace of Fox News.
I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just want to make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
You graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
God, I want to make sure.
Mr. President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that. I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
would you answer that
because
question?
the question is the question is
Justice,
the
radical
question,
left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
This
Who's
is
on your
so
list?
Right. Gentlemen, I think
this
we've
is
ended
so
this.
unprecedented.
He's going to pack the court.
We have
not going to give a list.
We have ended this segment. We're going to move on.
The vice presidential debate took place on October 8th. At this point in the race, Biden was leading in the polls, so the pressure was particularly on for Pence to defend the administration's record just days after the president tested positive for COVID-19. Donald Trump interrupted Joe Biden 71 times during the first presidential debate. Pence cut in on Harris a lot less, perhaps because one of his early attempts was witheringly cut down by Harris.
Well, I mean, I thought we saw enough of it in last week's debate, but I think this is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is, Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well,
I'm speaking.
In the final presidential debate, Biden came out swinging, making a case that over 222,000 Americans have died from coronavirus, in large part because of the Trump administration's response to the deadly disease. In contrast to the first debate, the microphones of both candidates were muted at select times.
I have released all of my tax returns, 22 years. Go look at them. 22 years of my tax return. You have not released a single solitary year of your tax return. What are you hiding?
Why are you unwilling?
President Trump, your response.
First of all, I called my accountants, underwrote it. I'm going to release them as soon as we can. I want to do it, and it'll show how successful, how great this company is.
Election night, November 3rd. The night ended without a clear winner, as many states' results were too close to call, and millions of votes remained uncounted, including in the battleground states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Results were delayed in these states due to local rules on counting mail-in ballots. Trump made a speech to a room full of supporters, falsely asserting that he had won the election and calling for a stop to all vote counting, saying that continued counting was a fraud on the American people and that we will be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Biden campaign denounced these attempts. By November 7th, several prominent Republicans had publicly denounced Trump's claims of electoral fraud, saying they were unsubstantiated, baseless, or without evidence, damaging to the election process, undermining democracy, and dangerous to political stability, while others supported his demand for transparency. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. was elected the 46th President of the United States on November 7th, promising to restore political normalcy and a spirit of national unity to confront raging health and economic crisis, and making Donald J. Trump a one-term president after 4 years of tumult in the White House. Mr. Trump is only the third elected president since World War II to lose re-election, and the first in more than a quarter century. Biden received the most votes for any presidential candidate ever. Biden promises to be different, to reverse some of Trump's most controversial policies, including on climate change, and to work more closely with America's allies. He is pressing ahead with forming his government. A number of his choices are set to make history, forming the most diverse economic leadership team America has ever seen. Biden's picks include the first woman to head up U.S. Treasury, the first Black person to deputies, and the first woman of color leading the Office of Management and Budget and the Council of Economic Advisors.
We did it, Joe. You're gonna be the next president of the United States.
Joe Biden, inaugurated as the 46th president on January 20th, 2021, promises to build back better, acting as a seasoned and steady hand in an uncertain, dangerous world.
It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again. And to make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as our enemies. They are not our enemies, they are Americans. They're Americans. The Bible tells us to everything there is a season, a time to build, a time to reap and a time to sow, and a time to heal. This is the time to heal in America.